At the time when I did my PhD, it was customary at the then Arespa's Department of Anthropology for a supervisor to come and visit their students during their long-term fieldwork. So that year, Alan went to visit Fraser MacDonald in Oksapmin and me in Kanjime. It was his first time in the Sepik, and the first time for people from Kanjime who called their place Last Place Blombus, which is the last place in the bush, as to get such an important visitor. And Tisa by come, they said, the teacher will come and visit us. The Aoyakai were as excited as they were apprehensive about Alan's visit, because they believed that the big man was coming to check on my well-being in the village, and if he felt that they were not taking good care of me, he would take me away and I would never come back. Not that they'd start taking better care of me, or needed to, but they wanted to do everything to make Alan believe that this was the case. They were preparing a big celebration for his arrival, and the plan was to wait for us fully decorated and start singing as soon as Alan arrived and go on till dawn. But instead, something strange happened when we arrived. No one was decorated, there were hardly any adults on the riverbank, and I couldn't hear any drums echoing from anywhere in the village. Alan was nevertheless carried into the house wing, where he sat down and shook hands, first with my father Aimakan, then with the school kids. But something was strange. Where were all the big men? What was going on?
Kandangnya sayang Pak Ibe. Thank you. Thank you.
Mio bungin papa belum mistret now.
Working school now?
Yeah.
Yambi.
Great.
Ja, maar mas belong, kam belong place to you para. Lagi mau one top belong, student belong me.
Yeah.
Darja.
Okay.
And top para get, just para support him through yeah. Para support him. Hi man. I'll get a concert.
Mataning.
School belong, fashion belong place para you para.
Yes.
I'll get a concert.
Yeah.
You like going to the How much speaking you got?
While the youngsters lined up to shake hands with Alan, people started whispering to me, Darja, we're in the middle of a fight. They found Kawasang and Inangi, two teenagers, having sex close to the village, and their families started a big fight. Don't tell him. Well, it was a bit hard not to. It was clear that there was some tension around, so I said, look, he sees us whispering. He knows that something is going on. Don't worry, I can tell him everything. He's like my father. As if I told my father everything, but... And as I was telling him that the village was in the middle of a fight, people around us were as if in shock, waiting for his reaction. But he said, oh, you were just fighting. Oh, well, don't worry. In the highlands where I work, people also fight. Oh, he's seen it before. He's used to fighting. Oh, so that's all right. What a relief. About an hour later, they were fighting again. And the next couple of days, they generously offered to take us to a bush camp in order to be able to finish the dispute without being afraid of offending Alan. What they didn't know was that Alan was no stranger to witnessing fighting. It was back in 1986 that he placed himself into the battlefield, observing and listening to the fighting talk between Perakaparka and Musika Malka that he later had reenacted and recorded. and later on analyzed and written about. He got so familiar with the local politics and fighting that he, if I'm not mistaken, the same year when you came for a visit, Alan, acted as a mediator in a peace-building workshop between the Kopia and Tilka tribes. This workshop was the first time since the fighting that the leaders met face to face. It is Alan's and Francesca's studies of fighting talk and other forms of talk that greatly influenced my study of fights and the language of fighting among the Aujakai. And while Alan's influence was even stronger in my analysis of verbal art, the spirit language of songs and parallelism, he has heard and as my supervisor read that so many times that I thought it would be better if he hears something new today. So instead of a well-studied topic, I chose one that I haven't yet written about and perhaps haven't even thought about it carefully enough. So I will gratefully invite comments on this work in progress. In my first postdoc, I started working with the Meakambut. They are a group of 62 people speaking Meakambut language, which is related to, but not the same as Aujakai. There are very few exogamous marriages, and they are becoming fewer as the neighboring groups, who used to highly praise the Meakambut for being the guardians of the site of origin, nowadays see them as backward, and as such they are not desirable marital partners. Namely, the Meakambut do not have a permanent settlement, but move in groups of up to 15 individuals, but often far fewer than that, maybe 2 to 6, between the rock shelters and other camps in their territory of limestone mountains in the northern fringe highlands of East Sepik province in Papua New Guinea. Apart from what I call the throw-and-go technique, they do not do much gardening, but they sustain themselves by moving between mature sago palms in their land, by hunting, limiting fishing, and foraging. While there are some groups who spend more time in the same camp, for example, even more than a month, most people move at least once a week, the pattern being going to another camp and, of course, hunting on the way, arriving there, sleeping for a day or two, or as long as the food lasts, and moving on again. So this is, you probably can't really well see. It's a map of some of the camps in their territory with it's an elevation map, but you can't see that properly now. What I, at the beginning, perceived as yet another quarrel again and again, seemed to have fit into the same pattern. Every time a small group visited a different camp, the newcomers hastened to report the current occupants any gossip or grievances from the previous camp, or brought in some aggravating news concerning their relationship with the neighboring groups. This normally created great agitation among the present camp dwellers and often led to a quarrel and the immediate departure of affected individuals to the camp from where the gossip originated, or if the neighboring groups were concerned, everybody immediately started planning some action against them. Let us take a look at a couple of examples. The first one is from our arrival at Ulaponguna rock shelter. I walked there with a group of 4 men, Pasu, Yakalok, Olomange, and Wapi. Soon after our arrival, Nek and his wife Komle arrived from Tapikumbia. So, in the following story, it will be important to see a little bit at who's who. Nek starts by saying that his wife Komle said that Pasu and his wife Uriame cut his sago, so he got angry. Then Pasu went on and insulted him and Komle. However, Nek said that he'd only been angry with his younger brother Jeffrey for taking his dog out to the bush and losing it. They'd quarreled about the dog and insulted each other. Nek's wife Komle confirms it was only Jeffrey and Nek who'd insulted each other, but Pasu understood that his younger sister Komle had been insulting him. He couldn't understand it, saying that he was the first one to see the son, meaning he was the older brother, so she shouldn't have done that. Then Nek says that he received a message that they were to cut his sago at Olopol sago stand rather than at Yanganal. He got angry because the sago at Olopol was not ready to be felled. Pasu says he didn't know Nek was only angry about the sago. He thought he wanted him and Ayapok to leave their own bush, especially after receiving a message from Daniel's and Anton's lot saying that Nek said, "Don't stay at Kandumgunda and waste my sago. Go somewhere else to fuck your women." The conversation goes on and they pretty much clarify all misunderstandings between them, which mostly derived from the fact that The messages are always carried between different camps and shelters, and so arrive like Chinese whispers, with information reinterpreted or lost. In the end, they revisit a fight that took place about 2 months before, in which Paso's brother Ayapok insulted ancestral spirits, who then blocked the nose of Nek's dog so that he can't hunt properly anymore. After the misunderstandings are clarified, they start sharing food. Nek asks Komle to give us some sago. They also give us a brushed turkey's egg, whereas Yakalok gives Nek and Komle some pineapple. Paso shares wild yam that we found on the way, and I was asked to give them Maggi cubes. Let us see the video recording now. I have to warn you that it was a complete coincidence that I had my camera on at the time, because we just arrived and I was busy with everything else. I was still kind of unpacking. The camera was hanging a bit, so it's definitely not cinematographically a perfect recording, but it is interesting for other reasons. The spirits are angry? Okay. The next example is Luke telling everyone in the camp that the Imboin, their neighbors, have yet again accused them of Sangoma, which is assault sorcery. The Imboin have been Meakambut's traditional enemies, and such accusations between them are not uncommon.
No,
A few more and witnessed several more examples of this practice of stirring up everyone upon arrival in a new camp. So I'll just give you a few stories. For example, Michael and 3 others came down from Tombacopa in great distress and started a fight because someone had killed one of his pigs to pay for his son's Yakalok's wife. Accusations are shot at all sides, grievances from the past fights come to the fore. Another example, Thomas arrives with a group of nearly 10 people from Tekap camp, one of the downriver camps. He complains bitterly about the fake missionaries. Huh? Okay. Here we have some fake missionaries from Yanguru who came to pretend they would bring development if the Meakambut filled 2 bottles with gold for them. They do the yellow panning. Thomas says that it is his land where they are panning, and that's why he doesn't allow it any longer. The third case, Daniel comes down with Merauk and a few others from Tumunik camp. He complains about his hand injury and attributes it to the young girl who did not want to marry him. Another case. Yet another example of stirring up the pot upon arrival is Yakalok arriving down from Pimbinjambasego's tent, telling that Mak Ayapok is coming down to break all my things because his brother Pasu has not yet compensated him for the time when he aimed at us with an arrow during their fight at Tombacopa Mountain. So, what is common to all these quarrels upon arrival is a very agitated manner of speaking, which is almost invariably followed by a reaction from the current camp dwellers. It rarely leads to a physical fight. More often, some of the current camp dwellers will get up and go to another camp where the gossip or troubles were brought from. While children and young teenagers are not competent in giving such reports yet, both men and women can perform in them, though it is more likely men than women. Women, on the other hand, women are very few in Meakambut society, so also they get less time to speak. I tentatively propose some explanation behind this practice. Food is not abundant in Meakambut land, and there are often tensions around it. Those who come to a camp hardly ever bring anything to eat with them. Food is eaten at the place where it is found rather than carried into the camps. The social expectation is that all food is shared, but people in the camp don't have a lot to spare. Arriving with some disturbing news provides a reason to be coming to the camp and distracts the camp dwellers to be too protective of their food. As these quarrels differ from ordinary quarrels in that they always take place immediately upon a small group's arrival at another camp, and that it often happens that everybody is calmed down by the end of the day, either sharing their food or intending to leave for another camp to settle things there, I call them clearing the air, and propose that this practice can be considered as a distinct linguistic register. As mentioned earlier, it is crucial to find out what Meakambut themselves think about this practice, but before I have the chance to do so, I would greatly appreciate to get some comments and questions from you. Thank you.
So we've got a couple of questions. Francesca.
Well, Darja, thank you very much for that, and those great films. I was just going to say that in Hagen too, or rather where we go, which is not in the town, but outside of the town, food is a very tense business as well, and people realize that, and there's this etiquette, because people live in houses there, you know, not like the Meakambut, but not intending to be there. You were intending to go somewhere else. And so food seems to me, even in and around that area where food is relatively plentiful most of the time, it seems to be a very high tension matter to sort of log into somewhere and expect to be fed.
Thank you. In Aoyakai, for example, the same, like food is more than with the Meakambut, where it's really scarce. But for example, they would always be teaching children, for example, you're eating and the children come and look at you and they say, "Akamoem, men nukumbra kanai." Don't look at her, she will bite her tongue. And whenever they eat, they would never sit around and look at each other, but they would always get their thing, turn around and eat like that. But the Meakambut don't do that. The Meakambut like to watch when you're eating because the expectation is that you must give it to them. So I also at some point learned to fight for my food, and when they were getting these big chunks, I said, "Why is your one so big and mine is so little?" And then they literally tore it off from their mouth and gave it to me as well. So yes, you have to fight for it.
The commonality is high tension.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Eating.
yes.
So we'll try and reproduce this in the coffee break.
Stay away from my coffee.
I think I saw Daniel's hand.
Yeah, so a couple things that I noticed that are quite different from where I work in this form of argument discourse that I would want to maybe like flag as potential areas that maybe have place for reflection and its questions, as well as are there other opportunities, like ritualized opportunities to clear the air? Like you say, we're going to sit down, have a bung or have a meeting and discuss this. Is that part of the argument resolution process? Because where I work, it is, right? And so you don't have to do it, I guess, when you enter an area because you know it's going to come up. You're not going to go more than like 3-4 days without having a meeting of some sort for somebody's, sleeping with someone you're not supposed to, taking their food, cutting their things from their garden, those kind of things. And the other one is bringing back up past arguments where I work, people do it, but it's taboo. It's supposed to be, you've resolved the argument and you're not allowed really to bring it back up. And bringing it back up is very bad form. I mean, and it happens, but you're supposed to say, okay, we had our meeting about that, we resolved it, and you don't get to keep bringing it back up in new arguments. So I guess
more like Aoyakai fights, for example, that really need to end in reconciliation, and one is really not to mention it again until the next fight. Of course, it does again. But as for Meakambut, this is not exactly the same. They would be solving problems. For example, when something is happening in the camp, they solve it there in a slightly different manner, and they also physically fight. But this kind of bringing gossip upon arrival is a slightly different thing.
And is it because it's important to know who's fighting with whom, and that's great, it's good to kind of keep track collectively, and you're moving around.
At the same time, I guess this is also the news. There's this traveling about who's doing what and what's happening. And it's amazing how they, for example, at the same time, they can be in 5 different places, but everybody knows where other people are. So it's all, yes, everybody is informed on everything.
Okay, I'm sure there are other questions, but I'm afraid that to keep to our schedule, we have to keep moving along. So thanks, Darja, for this presentation.